our networks up, keeping our confidence up, and attending monthly meetings so that she can keep up with all the trends in that workplace. For example, if someone involves themselves with community activities like PTA or church, this is a sample entry that could be inserted into a resume. 1999 to present, community and volunteer work. And that way there's no gap or not a significant gap in time between employment. So conceived, designed, and implemented annual fundraiser for local orphanage, raising up to $5,000. So that's fundraising, 12,000 corporate sponsorships, coordinated activities of volunteers. So these could all be skills that could be added to a resume to impress employers and really show that that we are able to do things even if it's not paid employment. Other things that we can do is some creative re-entry. For example, temporary agencies. 55% of all temporary workers are women. Temporary agencies are definitely a great way to showcase your skills to a variety of potential employers and at the same time assess the pros and cons of different companies and how family friendly they can be. Many employees from temporary agencies receive full-time offers eventually, and so that's a good way to try to get it. Part-time jobs are always good. They offer also exposure to different employers and to try to make sure you're still up to par. 70% of all part-time workers are women. More volunteering, editing newsletters, being a treasurer to an organization, doing a membership drive. All of these skills are transferable to potential employers. A creative reentry strategy would also be considering a non-traditional occupation. So if you remember the 6% of women that are employed in non-traditional jobs, that is where there's less competition for women to enter occupations. And we offer a lot, even just on this campus. I know we offer just occupational trades like this. We have aviation, we have air conditioning, we have welding, we have horticulture, sprinkler repair. We have a lot of really good occupational careers that could really help a woman re-enter the workforce. And this is another strategy to use, translating those family community achievements to the professional world. How many times has a woman motivated someone or managed people in the household, managed events, multitasking, doing a million different things at once, budgeting for the house, thinking of groceries and cleaning supplies and making sure she sticks to a budget. So those are important skills also to bring into an employment. These are just a sample of transferable skills that a woman can translate from running a household, running a volunteer organization into the workforce. So an operator, administrator, planner, scheduler, coordinator. Definitely have to have a lot of scheduling abilities when it's running a household. Inventory control, motivator, persistence. So a lot of transferable skills that can be offered to potential employers. In keeping a job, once a woman secures a job, what potential barriers can keep a woman away from being able to keep her job and improve in the job? So women are most likely to be affected by child care and elder care responsibilities. Also needing flexible hours where perhaps there's something going on with children or having to take an elder to the doctor, time management, understanding supervisors. So supervisors that are hopefully understanding of a woman's situation. And then at the same time managing a household at the same time as trying to fit in child care responsibilities and work responsibilities. And of course the financial burden and the never-ending office politics that can get in the way. So these are things that women need to assess ahead of time and plan how to tackle these barriers so we're not caught off guard. This is a fun one. Trying to look for companies that really take care of working companies for working parents, and there's a list of a lot of them. I'll just give you an example. Allstate has nutritious meals at cafes, and parents can bike ride to the next meeting. So they can bike ride between meetings. American Express has a special needs support group. So support group for parents with children of for parents of children with special needs. They also have fatherhood education, flexible work arrangements, and tuition assistance. Bank of America has a returning talent workshop for stay-at-home moms returning to the workforce. So they actually help stay-at-home moms who want to return to the workforce gain the skills they need and place them in the right positions based on their skills. Lego, they have spontaneous basketball and soccer games, Lego bricks in every office, and bike rides around campus. They have 26 weeks off guaranteed when giving birth or adopting. They also can leave work early to attend children's events. And 90% of employees use flex time schedule and 50% telecommute. SC Johnson, they have an incredible daycare, summer camps, and educational sessions for teens. They have on-site fitness, and they have their office closed from Christmas to New Year's. So for women who are returning to the workforce, or even women who are planning to raise a family while they work, these types of companies are really incredible and family friendly. Now, not just returning to the workforce, but returning to school. We know we have a lot of students in our classes that are doing that. And the same sorts of barriers or challenges will come up. Childcare, time management. Of course, balancing academic demands with childcare and work demands. A lot of these students feel underprepared, and they have to manage all the other chores outside of work. And of course, the financial burden of school, or going back to school. Confidence is a big one. Even though adult learners or women that are returning to the workforce have more experience and knowledge about life, their confidence is a lot less than, say, for example, a more traditional younger student. Confidence in their abilities. So it's important to lend support to women who are going back to school. So how to ease, or some other financial burdens of college. Of course, we have all of these things that contribute to college being a burden financially for women, of course, and the working world as well. But we have some solutions. So women can request help from family members, from other parents. Limiting activities doesn't mean that children have to do everything that they want to do. Community resources can be very helpful, and as children get older, having them help more. As far as financial burden, we obviously have financial aid, grants, loan scholarships for women who are returning to work and who are returning to school. And work study is a great way to enhance skills and actually have a job on campus. Re-entry is a great way for women that are going into non-traditional fields to receive assistance. And TRIO is another great program that also assists people returning to school. We have a career center, and we have on-campus childcare. It's not at Henderson campus, but we have it at the other two campuses. So that's always a plus. Academic success at CSN means accessing tutorial services, academic coaching, basically studying smarter, studying the right way, and not wasting resources, precious time and money resources, and retaking classes or studying or taking the wrong classes as well. So all of these resources are available at CSN for these women. So hopefully you enjoyed it.
Questions?
Can you explain TRIO? Yeah, TRIO, it's a federally funded program that is actually out of the Cheyenne campus. There's an application that goes along with it, and it's for students tuition, help with books, help with unlimited tutoring. So they have a lot of great resources. They do have an application process. They have about 200 students a semester that are accepted and that are funded through the federal government. So just look up TRIO on our CSN website and you will get
One more round of applause for Stephanie. I thought of this. So Professor Mason gave us a sense of where we are as far as women in the workplace. I brought this back today. The book called Marine Corps Wife. My mother was a Marine Corps wife. This book was published in 1955. So Professor Mason gave us a sense of where we are. This will give you a sense of where we are. This is so add this to your presentation. Quoting from the book, published 1955. If you do work, this is talking to the woman, the Marine Corps wife. If you do work, always remember that your husband and your home should come first. And it is not acceptable to expect your husband to accept as slapdash sort of housekeeping. Also, never use your job as an alibi. Above all, whatever temptation you might be felt to be a martyr, banish it forever. 1955, 2015. This is about progress, right? I've been excited about this next guest since we organized this. Let's go back in time to listen to one of the founding mothers of the women's suffrage movement. For most of us, when we think of the fight for women's rights, we think of Susan B. Anthony, right? We've all heard of Susan B. Anthony. However, many people believe our esteemed visitor today, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, should have that honor. Let's hear from her about her life and her fight to get women to vote, and why she's only recently gotten the credit that she deserves. Please welcome Ms. Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
When I was a curious young girl, I sat in my father's law library and read about the ways in which the law favored men. As we heard before, women had virtually no property, income, employment, or even custody of their own children. Even my own father, the noted attorney and former Congressman Daniel Cady, had little faith in my ability to accomplish anything other than that which I was born to do, because I was female. I was only 11 years old when my beloved elder brother Eleazar died in 1826. I went to my grieving father, and I told him that I would try to be all that my brother had been. He only replied, "Oh, daughter, I wish you were a boy." And although I graduated near the top of my class at the Johnstown Academy, the boys who I had bested academically were accepted to the prestigious Union College. But I was not allowed to apply due to my lack of status as a person. Instead, I attended a women's seminary. It was an acceptable education, but not the one I would have chosen had I been able to choose. Times have certainly changed. In this hall today, I see many women who have taken their rightful place as leaders. I also see young women, students, who look to them for guidance and direction about the leadership roles that you plan to take in just a few short years. You are indeed fortunate, young women, for in my time, women were considered property, similar to livestock, no better than the slaves that many Americans kept. In fact, it was as a young bride in 1840 that this was again brought very clearly to my attention. I had married Henry Brewster Stanton only a few months previously, requesting of the minister to omit the words, "promise to obey." and was entering into an equal relation. Henry and I were abolitionists, and although my family had owned slaves, I was dedicated to the cause of freedom for all. So, Lucretia Mott, the well-known Quaker abolitionist, and I traveled as part of a larger group of women to London to participate in the first World Anti-Slavery Convention. But when our delegation arrived, we discovered that neither our presence nor even our involvement in the cause of abolition was welcome. We women were not allowed to formally participate in the meeting, but could only listen to the proceedings from behind a curtained wall. This experience clearly showed me that our gender needed emancipation in much the same way as slaves did. Lucretia and I promised each other that on our return to America, we would find a way to hold a women's rights convention. So, in a very real sense, women's suffrage sprang from the fight to end slavery. It took 8 long years, but we accomplished our goal. In July of 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York. I won't bore you with my entire address to that distinguished group, but I believe that the ideas that I put forth in my speech had only been uttered previously in small groups, in whispered tones. It was something entirely different to be able to speak them aloud to over 300 women and men. Here is a short excerpt. You may notice that my style of oratory is somewhat more bombastic than more conversational delivery altogether. So please keep that in mind. We have met here today to discuss our rights and wrongs, civil and political, and not, as some have supposed, to go into the detail of social life alone. We do not propose to petition the legislature to make our husbands just, generous, and courteous, or to seat every man at the head of a cradle, and to clothe every woman in male attire. None of these points will be touched in this convention. But we are assembled here to protest against a form of government existing without the consent of the governed, to declare our right to be free as man is free, to be represented in the government which we are tasked to support, to have such disgraceful laws as give man the power to chastise and imprison his wife, to take the wages that she earns, the property which she inherits, and, in case of separation, the children of her love, laws which make her the mere dependent on his bounty. It is to protest against such unjust laws as these that we are assembled today, and to have them, if possible, forever erased from our statute books. We do not expect our path will be strewn with the flowers of popular applause, but over the thorns of bigotry and prejudice will be our way, and on our banners will beat the dark storm clouds of opposition from those who have entrenched themselves behind the stormy bulwarks of custom and authority, and who have fortified their position by every means, holy and unholy. But we will steadfastly abide the result. Unmoved, we will bear it aloft. Undauntedly, we will unfurl it to the gale, for we know that the storm cannot rend from it a shred, that the electric flash will but more clearly show to us the glorious words inscribed on it: equality of rights. As right to the elective franchise. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation of which she had no voice, having deprived her of this first right as a citizen, the elective franchise, thereby leaving her without representation in the halls of the legislation. He has oppressed her on all sides. He has made her, if married, in the eye of the law, civilly dead, and so on. I mean, you can see where I'm leading with this. And finally, we made our demand. Now, in view of this entire disenfranchisement of 1/2 the people of this country, their social and religious degradation, in view of the unjust laws above mentioned, and because women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of the most sacred rights, we insist that they have immediate admission to all the rights and privileges which belong to them as citizens of these United States. This declaration was very well received. 100 people signed the document, 68 women and 32 men. Of course, our demands were not immediately met, nor were they met during my entire lifetime, but, and this is the important part, they had been spoken about. They were out there in the ether, and they could never be ignored again. Now, lest you think I was someone so dedicated to women's rights that I ignore my other duties, you should be aware that I gave birth to and raised 7 children during that time. I also became dear friends with someone whose name you may know, Susan B. Anthony. We met in 1851, and I liked her immediately. We had very different dispositions. I was a thinker, a writer, very verbal. She was quiet, thoughtful, organized. We worked together and corresponded over the years, and I often admitted to her that I felt torn between my motherly duties and my desire to fight for women's rights. I also used that time to help Susan grow from a somewhat reticent, ineloquent, but impassioned temperance reformer to a true leader and a champion for the cause of suffrage. I wrote speeches for her. We discussed strategy. I served as her sounding board, and she was mine. We often traveled together to promote women's rights. But Susan was unencumbered by marriage and family, and she was able to travel more extensively than I, at least until my children were grown. So she organized and ran our various organizations while I researched, wrote, and published many articles. After the great and terrible Civil War, when emancipation for the slaves was finally won, I made the decision to fight against the ratification of the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, not because they gave former slaves rights, including, of course, the right to vote, but because it still continued to disenfranchise women. I was angry. Why could not suffrage be universal without regard to either sex or race? I was told to be patient, that our time would come. But I am not a patient person. A rift arose in our ranks. Some women wanted to work for the vote state by state. They formed their own association to accomplish this. But Susan and I did not think that that would be successful. We could not win our rights through the 15th Amendment, and we would seek them at the federal level through our own amendment. We worked tirelessly for the next decades. In 1890, our 2 separate groups became one with the formation of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. I served as its first president, and Susan followed in my footsteps to become the second president. Even though we were all finally working together, I was more and more concerned not just about voting rights, but of women's position in society. Of course, I traveled and lectured and wrote with the ultimate goal of suffrage in mind. However, I also advocated for divorce rights, employment rights, property rights, birth control, and the right to marry someone of a different race. The older I became, the more I believed that the religious patriarchy kept women from advancing. And I was not afraid to say so. While these ideas may have gained more acceptance over the last 100 years, in the late 19th century they were too radical for many people and put me at odds with some of my colleagues. I understand that the suffrage movement sought acceptance from the largest number of people in order to win support for the amendment. And Susan, who was much less provocative than I, was simply a better figurehead in that regard. After I was gone in 1902, my part in the movement was diminished. Many young suffragettes had joined the NAWFA, and to them, Susan was their leader. They knew less and less of me, only that I was controversial. By 1920, when the 19th Amendment was ratified, I was rarely mentioned. It was Susan who was given the most credit. I do not begrudge her this honor. She was my dear friend and well deserved the glory. I see her face on this coin. Nothing could make me prouder. And as the years have passed, my contribution to women's rights has once again been acknowledged. My time is running short. I must soon leave you again. But I beg you not to forget those of us who dedicated our lives to the great work of suffrage for all Americans. The journey was long, the road difficult, and the destination, while closer, has not yet been fully attained. Yes, laws and regulations have been enacted to fight discrimination, but true social equality of race and gender eludes America to this very day. Do not let Lucretia's work, Susan's work, my work, be in vain. Keep fighting until the words equality of rights is not simply an ideal to be held up and admired, but a reality. Have courage. Keep fighting. Thank you.
God, Elizabeth Cady's dead and everybody, come on! You later. Another public service announcement, I know I keep saying this. If you snuck in recently and you have not signed the sign-in sheet, am I describing anybody? Okay, sign-in sheet out that door, that way, because you're here for extra credit in the class, right? So in order to get that extra credit, sign in, put my name down, stuff like that. Faculty too, if you're faculty, staff, anything like that, also sign in, it helps us justify the LPO, okay? Our next speaker is a friend and a fellow historian. Dr. Deanna Beachley is a professor of women's studies and history. You should see Dr. Beachley twice a year, right? Fall meetings, spring meetings. We're on a committee together to see each other on the Henderson campus. I honestly didn't know what to do with the Henderson campus, but she's going to give a talk. She's going to give a talk on, it's called Cross Country for Suffrage, Sarah Bard Field's Journey in 1915. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Professor of History and Women's Studies, our friend and colleague, Dr. Deanna Beachley.
So essentially, I'm going to mention a few things that others have talked about in some respects, to reveal some of what women did in order to achieve the goal. This is coming in 1915, where 12 women in the western states had achieved the right to vote, but not the rest of the country. It was a tricky hearing, so Sarah Bard Field told an interviewer of the almost 3-month cross-country automobile she took for And yet, on September 16th, Sarah Bardfield on the left, poet and suffragist Frances Jolliffe, and two Swedish women who owned the car, Miss Ingeborg Kipstedt and Miss Maria Kinberg, left the Panama Pacific International Exposition to make their way east to Washington, D.C. to time their arrival with the start of a congressional session in early December. More than daring, this trip was well-planned and orchestrated, a cross-country pageant that brought the movement for the Susan B. Anthony Federal Amendment great national attention. This was seen as a dangerous adventure taken not for personal pleasure, but for the suffrage cause. While the trip did not result in the immediate passage of the constitutional amendment, it nonetheless served as a way to prove to many that the suffragists were not going to neatly fade away, and it ended up in reinvigorating the suffrage movement. The seventh. Why choose San Francisco to launch this event? It goes back to the Panama Pacific International Exposition, which was held in San Francisco for much of 1915. The exposition was to celebrate the completion of the Panama Canal and brought together people and exhibitors from about 30 countries to the city that was still rebuilding after the devastating earthquake and fire in 1906. The Congressional Union, the CU, which was the more radical of two suffrage organizations at that time, maintained a freedom booth in the Palace of Education, which is the building there on the right-hand side. Amidst exhibitions of art, modern machinery, Luther Burbank's paint, plant experiments, women's suffragists claimed space for politics. Alice Paul, the president of the Congressional Union, had special petitions made with the statement of belief that the women of the country should be given the vote in the same way that the Negro had been given it by federal amendment. They asked for signatures of the voting women and all people like mayors and governors who visited the fair. Those who worked at the booth not only encouraged people to sign the petition, but they also interviewed prominent people who stopped by. Doris Stevens, member of the Congressional Union's Executive Committee, came to San Francisco to help out for the duration of the exposition. Sarah Bardfield helped out as well, and she recalled that we found that people were not only willing to sign the petition, but were eager to. From February 20th, when the exposition opened, until September 15th, when the suffragists left, about 500,000 signatures were gathered on this great petition, which was on a huge roll of paper and extended some 18,333 feet, or the equivalent of 6,111 football fields. The booth had a banner on display that said, "The world has progressed in most ways, but not yet in its recognition of women." And that's a view of the booth, and in the back there you can see what became known as the Great Demand banner. We demand an amendment to the United States Constitution and franchising women. For the voting women from the West who attended the exposition and signed the petition, it gave them a new vision of something they could do with their vote outside of their immediate state. The idea for taking this great petition to Washington, D.C. began to take shape in August and culminated with the launching of the trip at the first Voting Women's Convention held at the fair in September. Alice Paul and the members of the Congressional Union specialized in parades, demonstrations, pageantry, and the utilization of dignified affairs of state for its own ends. The Voting Women's Women's Convention demonstrated the flamboyant, dramatic, and single-purpose the members of the Congressional Union were in their unification